Right. Pauline Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to provide for a power to require a person to grant access to their digital devices in the course of a lawful inspection under the Customs and Excise Management Act 1979, where there's a reasonable suspicion that the device may contain child sexual abuse material, to provide that refusal to grant such access constitutes an offence and for connected purposes. I want to begin by outlining the scale of the problem this bill seeks to tackle. Up to 835,000 individuals in the United Kingdom represent a sexual risk to children, according to the National Strategic Assessment. We also know 85% of online offenders are hands-on abusers too. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys are sexually assaulted before the age of 18. Child sexual abuse material, or CSAM, is abundant online, so much so that there are almost 30 million unique CSAM files known to UK law enforcement, and the number is growing all the time. The digital age has brought with it tremendous opportunities for advancement in many areas. Communication has never been easier, and the world has never been smaller. But as the world has become smaller, criminal networks have grown larger. Law enforcement is still having to play catch-up, and as a result, tragically, unforgivably, more and more children are becoming victims to sexual predators. Mr. Speaker, the UK Border Force is our first line of defence against people travelling with intent to cause harm, whatever that may be. Their search powers have been sufficient to stop terrorists and drug smugglers, but they're not sufficient to stop child abusers. That's because the law governing the scope of their search powers was drafted in the 1970s, long before a digital age. A single photo taken from one of today's smartphones could easily exceed the entire capacity of even the highest spec 1970s floppy disk, then at the revolutionary cutting edge of computing. It was not an era when it was even conceivable that sexual predators would be travelling across borders with potentially thousands of illegal photos and videos in the palm of their hand. So the outdated law in question is the Customs and Excise Management Act 1979. It grants the power for a Border Force agent to search an individual and their baggage to detect the import or export of prohibited goods. Border Force does not require reasonable grounds to suspect the individual is in possession of prohibited goods to utilise this power in search in a port environment. Whilst existing powers permit Border Force to require an individual to present their baggage, including their digital devices, these powers do not extend to being able to require a person to open this baggage, i.e. unlock it. If they refuse to do so when asked, there's nothing the Border Force can do. In previous decades, CSAM would amount to a stack of Polaroids, which are often unmistakable and readily detectable. Now, all this material is carried digitally and often beyond encryption software and postcodes. To expand on this point, there have been several examples of lone individuals identified as being in possession of belongings associated with the commission of sexual offences against children. For example, toys, lubricants, condoms, and children's underwear. In these circumstances, where it's reasonable to suspect that the individual may be in possession of digital CSAM, Border Force cannot inspect the digital device unless the individual consents. Each time this happens, we could be letting in a dangerous abuser into the United Kingdom undetected. As I mentioned in my Westminster Hall debate on the same subject late last year, even when notified, it can take weeks for the police to trace an individual. There have been cases where a suspect has raped 2 or more young girls before being caught. Mr. Speaker, my bill gives Border Force the power it needs to prevent this. Under it, an individual refusing to unlock their digital devices will be subject to arrest for a new offence of obstruction. An international passenger of any nationality arrives or departs from the UK, the Border Force reasonably suspects the individual to be involved in a child sexual abuse. They are asked to unlock their digital device so the Border Force officers can perform a scan to determine beyond any reasonable doubt the presence of CSAM as verified by the Home Office's database. If they comply, the scan then takes place, and if content is detected, the individual is arrested under the 1979 Act. If they refuse, they commit an offence, and their devices are seized and forensically examined by the police or the National Crime Agency. And I want to go into a little more detail about the technology which is available now and how it will be used, because I know there may be some honourable members concerned about privacy. The power to search a device will be governed by a standard operating procedure which would ensure a device inspection was undertaken via a scan, not a download, which only searches a device's memory for a file, code or hashtag associated with known CSAM files. These codes are held on a Home Office database, which, as I said earlier, contains nearly 30 million unique files. There will be no manual device inspection or collateral searches. It also means the Border Force officers wouldn't have to be subjected to any horrific material themselves, as they would likely have been in previous decades. It's worth noting that a similar power already exists for the police in relation to terrorism material under Schedule 7 of the Terrorist Act 2000. Mr. Speaker, with these new powers, Border Force will become a full part of the multi-agency response needed to help prevent the proliferation of CSAM online. It also means they'll be able to meet recommendations by the Independent Inquiry on Child Sexual Abuse to increase proactive detection of previously unidentified persons and therefore safeguard children from new or further harm. Earlier, I mentioned that over 800,000 people in the UK present a sexual risk to children. What I did not say was very few of these individuals have been identified. With the new powers outlined, Border Force will go from having a near zero impact on locating offenders to playing an active role in preventing the sexual abuse of children. Further, it will also be able to prevent potential first-generation CSAM from making it onto the internet. Detection at the border can then be a starting point for further investigation, identifying other devices, items held at the suspect's home, or looking into other offences against New Zealand. As it is in New Zealand, a member of the Five Eyes Intelligence Sharing Group, which brought in similar powers for the Border Force under 2018 Customs Act, they report a near 100% increase in intelligence-led interdictions against travelling child sex offences since the law was passed. Mr. Speaker, I'll conclude. For many years, I've campaigned against all forms of child abuse. Last year, in February last year, the Marriage and Civil Partnership Minimum Age Act 2022, which I sponsored, came into force. It means it's illegal under any circumstances for a child under 18 to be married. Mr. Speaker, we brought an end to this form of abuse, but it's wrong that we still have laws which are so outdated that they allow sexual predators and abusers to escape justice, that we must expend serious parliamentary time and resources to enact what I believe is a simple and inarguable case is also a great frustration. Passing this bill would give the UK Border Force the ability to play an active role in identifying previously unknown individuals who might represent a danger to children. In doing so, we will be further protecting our children from the lifelong trauma which so often results from being the victim of sexual abuse. Child abuse is happening now, and these powers should be there to confront it. Thank you.
Hang on. Polly, come back. No. The honourable member I'd like to bring in the bill. The question is that honourable members have leave to bring in the bill. As many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare to bring in the bill? No.
Cheryl Murray, Ian Little-Granger, Heather Wheeler, Martin Vickers and myself, Mr Speaker.
Pauline Latham.
Child Sexual Abuse Material Digital Devices Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 21st of June.
Friday the 21st of June. Thanks, Pauline.